My boyfriend had a hearing impairment, and he often couldn't hear what I said clearly. I said I wanted chocolate cake, but he bought strawberry cake. I heard you wrong, and Chloe loves this flavor, so I'll take it to her. I said I didn't want the diamond ring to be too flashy, but he bought one with a diamond as big as a pigeon egg. I heard you wrong again, but Chloe likes this, so I'll give it to her. Then I carefully planned the design for our future home and asked him to buy a house in South Bay for us. But on the day of the final inspection, he drove all the way to North Hills. When he noticed I had been silent the whole ride, he apologized again. I really didn't hear you clearly, and I thought you liked the scenery over here in North Hills, so I bought it without thinking. But I knew Chloe, his childhood sweetheart, worked for a company nearby. He hadn't failed to hear me. He had simply never wanted to listen. At that moment, all my strength suddenly drained away, and I spoke with a calm I had never felt before. Ethan Sterling, let's break up. He looked up in confusion and instinctively touched the hearing aid by his ear. What did you just say? I didn't hear you. Every time I spoke, he never paid attention because he knew I would patiently repeat myself. But this time, I didn't want to repeat it again and again. Nothing, I said, trying to stay calm. Return the house. I said to buy in South Bay, so it should be in South Bay. In an instant, his face darkened. A house isn't like a shirt you can just return whenever you want. You drew the design plans, and the renovation was the result of me supervising day and night. Now you say you don't want it, and that's it? Can you stop making a scene? The atmosphere froze, and just then, the door lock suddenly clicked open. Chloe scanned her fingerprint and walked in as if this were her own home, and the three of us stared at one another. After she realized we were arguing, she bit her lip, her face flushed red. Please try to understand Ethan. He has a hearing impairment, and it's not like he misheard you on purpose. Why don't I cook something to cheer you both up? She washed the vegetables, trimmed them, and put them in the pan with practiced ease. She was so familiar with everything that it looked like she was in her own home. When Ethan watched her busy in the kitchen, his eyes were full of tenderness. Then he went over to help her out of habit, and they moved together with warm, effortless chemistry. But they seemed to have forgotten that this was supposed to be our future home. Just as I was about to leave, Ethan jogged over and grabbed my arm. She's kindly making you a housewarming dinner, and you're still giving everyone attitude? You're being way too unreasonable. Was this really a housewarming dinner for me? In fact, from the moment I walked in, I had noticed that the layout of the entire house was nothing like what I had designed. The guest room that was supposed to be used for hosting friends and family was twice the size of the primary bedroom. To force it bigger, they had even squeezed the walk-in closet I had carefully designed down to the size of a storage room. Even the tiles on the wall were polished tiles I had rejected from the start. Clearly, everything had already been changed according to Chloe's preferences. I said lightly, "You two eat." After that, I was about to push the door open and leave, but Chloe blocked me first. She wore a pitiful expression. Although I don't know why you're angry, but if you want to blame someone, blame me. Ethan has a hearing impairment, and if your voice is too loud, he won't be able to handle it. Please try to understand him. My nails dug deep into my palm, and the pain shot through me. I had seen her lose her temper at Ethan far too many times. Once, she even slapped away the hearing aid he cared about most. But he only hurried to pick it up and begged her to repeat the insult she had just thrown at him. He was afraid he had missed something important. Yet every time we argued, he would casually take off his hearing aid. Then he would let me break down like a hysterical lunatic. But from now on, I would never make a scene again. If she doesn't want to eat, then forget it. Let her go. Impatience climbed into Ethan's voice. Looking at the lightning flashing and thunder rolling outside the window, he gave a soft sneer, but it stabbed straight into my heart. Just don't come crying later, saying you're scared of thunder. When I was abused by my stepfather, I was often shoved out into heavy rain until I lost consciousness. Ever since then, I had been terrified of thunder, and Ethan had always stayed with me through every stormy night without fail. But even though he knew my weakness better than anyone, he still pushed me toward the door out of spite. Ah! Chloe's scream pulled me back to reality. Ethan immediately pulled her back to his side and coaxed her in a low voice. Don't be scared. I'm right here. I'll finish the rest of the dishes. Stay here. The scene in front of me overlapped with the way we used to be. I turned around, pushed open the door, rushed into the rain without hesitation, and quickly called a cab. That night, my fever nearly reached 104 degrees. Chloe had already posted a huge table of food on Instagram. There's a bedroom that belongs only to me in the new house, and it's even bigger than the primary bedroom. A certain someone's housewarming dinner tastes even better now. But I clearly remembered that Ethan had sworn he would never go into the kitchen because he hated the smell of grease and smoke. Yet Chloe still broke through his bottom line. When I came back to my senses, I pulled up a phone number that had been buried at the very bottom of my contacts. You once said you would always save a place for me. Does that still count? After receiving an excited and certain answer, I took fever medicine and fell asleep in a daze. The next day, I was woken up by a phone call. Emma Clark, who taught you manners? You agreed to come to the family dinner, and now you're making the entire Sterling family wait for you? My head burned like it was about to split open. I have a fever. Stop making excuses. Get here now. Don't make everyone wait for you. I dragged my weak body to the Sterling family estate, only to find that Chloe was sitting beside Ethan. Everyone in the family wore different expressions, and Mrs. Sterling in particular looked at me with cold disdain. No matter how many times I explained that I wasn't marrying Ethan for money, she still called me a gold digger again and again. You sleep until noon and still say you're not marrying in just to live the easy life? Who would believe that? No one saw the sweat covering my forehead, and no one saw how weak my legs were. Ethan did not step in to help me like he used to. The waves of accusations pressed down on me until I could barely breathe, so I put down my cutlery. Mrs. Sterling, I'm not marrying him anymore. Mrs. Sterling's expression froze on her face, and Ethan quickly went to soothe her. Mom, she's joking with everyone. The wedding is already set for the day after tomorrow. After saying that, he pulled me into a corner. You can be stubborn, but there has to be a limit. You know my mom is desperate for grandchildren, so were those words something you should say to an elder? I was the one being mocked, and I was also the one being blamed. He lectured me nonstop, not noticing my discomfort at all. Just as I was about to lose my temper, Chloe looked at me pitifully. The charm on your wrist is really pretty. Can you give it to me? I instinctively tightened my palm, and it felt as if a thorn had lodged in my throat. Ethan had gotten this charm for me from a faraway church after praying for my safety. Back then, when my mother was being abused by my stepfather, he had tied it onto my wrist himself and said he would protect me and keep me safe for the rest of my life. Unwilling to accept it, I looked at him. What do you think? He said nothing, but the sorrow in his eyes told me that the person he wanted to protect now was someone else.
Fine.
My decisiveness made Ethan look at me in shock. But I had already taken off the charm and casually stuffed it into Chloe's hand. If I could give up a 7-year relationship, what did this charm even count for? After leaving the Sterling estate, I received the official job offer and immediately booked a flight out. After returning to my old place, I started packing my suitcase. I didn't expect Ethan to come back and see it, and he misunderstood, thinking I was packing for our honeymoon. You're starting this early? You're way too impatient. Besides, we're going to Antarctica for our honeymoon. Why are you packing summer clothes? Do you want to freeze to death? I froze. A long time ago, we had agreed that after we got married, we would go to Hawaii for our honeymoon because that was where we first met. He had kissed my forehead and said, no matter how many times we revisit the same place, at least the person beside me will never change. That was why I had asked him 3 days ago to buy the plane tickets. Almost instinctively, I blurted out, wasn't it Hawaii? Ethan impatiently pulled out 2 plane tickets, and they were indeed for Antarctica. The next second, another ticket fell out of his pocket with the same date and destination. He paused, then explained unnaturally. Maybe I heard you wrong. I thought you wanted to go to Antarctica. When I was paying, maybe I accidentally clicked the wrong thing and bought one extra. But on the other ticket, Chloe's name was written clearly. I suddenly remembered that 3 days ago, Chloe had posted on Instagram and shared many videos of the aurora in Antarctica. How amazing would it be if someone could take me to see the northern lights? I'm making a wish right here. Looking at it now, Ethan was the person who had helped her wish come true. My voice had never been heard by him, and I had never truly entered his heart. I lifted my head and forced my tears back. Refund my ticket. When Ethan heard that, he completely lost patience with me. Isn't traveling anywhere basically the same? And with one more person, we'll have one more person to look out for each other. Why do you have to make such a big deal out of this? You're getting more and more dramatic. I looked up and stared into his eyes. I couldn't believe those words had come from his mouth. After I escaped the darkness of my stepfather's abuse, I had suffered from depression for a while. Every time I lost my temper or cried, he would always comfort me unconditionally. He would clumsily wipe away my tears. He would tell me jokes in a terrible accent just to make me laugh. He would never call me dramatic. I took a deep breath. I'm not angry. It's because I'm going to. Ethan's special ringtone suddenly rang, and it was Chloe calling. He covered the speaker and hid in the study. With a bang, The door shut my unspoken words outside. I was going to leave. In the middle of the night, I heard him sighing in the study. She already gives me this much of a headache now. After we get married, I'll suffer even more. Back then, I stayed with her until she got over her depression. I never said it out loud, but she should know how annoying that was for me. Every word was clear, and every sentence stabbed my heart. I didn't know what happened on the other end, but Ethan suddenly tensed up. You don't feel well? Okay. Once she's asleep, I'll go to the new house to find you. Separated by the thick study door, I gave a bitter smile. There was no need to go to such lengths. I would no longer get in their way. Leaning against the door, I heard him call Chloe by her nickname again and again. He had always hated voice messages, but he opened Chloe's voice notes and listened to them over and over. I stopped listening, returned to the bedroom, and slept deeply for once. I didn't even know when Ethan left. Early the next morning, bursts of laughter suddenly came from downstairs. The living room was packed with friends and relatives, all raising glasses and chatting happily. When Ethan saw me wearing wrinkled pajamas, he frowned in displeasure. Did you forget the wedding rehearsal is today? My parents arrived early, and you're coming downstairs dressed like that? Everyone's eyes fell on me, some full of contempt and some full of mockery. It was as if they were all saying, how could Ethan Sterling marry a woman of my class? Ethan felt embarrassed, and he waved his hand impatiently. Go change into a decent dress before coming down. You're making it look like the Sterling family mistreats you. Chloe was wearing a white gown styled like a wedding dress, as if she were the bride-to-be. I ignored Ethan's bossy attitude and was about to formally announce our broken engagement while everyone was there. But Chloe skipped over, grabbed my hand, and pulled me in front of someone. It's such a happy day, so I specially invited your father over to make things livelier. You won't blame me for being nosy, will you? The moment I looked up, my heartbeat stopped. The person in front of me was the stepfather who had beaten my mother to death, right in front of my eyes. His voice sounded like a demon beside my ear. My good girl, how could you not invite me to such a big, happy event like your wedding? I came to congratulate you too. In an instant, fear and hatred swept through me like electricity. Chloe suddenly leaned closer and whispered excitedly in my ear. I heard this man beat your mother to death, and they still haven't even found the body. Tisk, tisk. And yet you still have the mood to get married here. Besides, how could such a happy moment in your life be missing someone from your family, right? Looking at the demon who appeared in my nightmares day and night, my eyes turned red. How do you know about that? My voice was trembling, and I must have looked terrifyingly crazed. Chloe's gaze flicked toward Ethan, who knew nothing. One time, he made me cry, so he told me this story to cheer me up. Oh, don't glare at me like that.
Slap.
I raised my hand and struck her across the face. The next second, Ethan shoved me away with full force. Emma Clark, you ungrateful woman. Chloe invited your family here for the wedding rehearsal because she was thinking of you. How dare you hit her? Apologize right now. Chloe hid in his arms and provoked me with the posture of a winner. I suddenly laughed, caught off guard by my own laughter, like a madwoman. I had peeled open every hideous scar for him to see, and he had turned around and used it as a joke to comfort another girl. Under his shocked gaze, I said each word clearly.
In
your dreams. Ethan Sterling were done. Ethan's face immediately darkened, and disbelief flashed through his eyes. I ignored him, went upstairs, grabbed my suitcase, and left through the back door of the villa. Even a goodbye felt unnecessary. 1 hour before the wedding, Ethan irritably knocked on the door of the backstage dressing room. Emma Clark, that's enough. This isn't like being at home. No one is waiting 3 hours for you to do your makeup today. The next second, the door was opened in anger. But the woman who came out was a stranger in a bridal gown. Why are you knocking like that? You've got the wrong person. Just as Ethan froze, the venue manager rushed over, panting. Mr. Sterling, I forgot to tell you. Miss Clark canceled the wedding venue yesterday. The air in the VIP lounge of the wedding hall turned icy cold. Ethan stood frozen at the doorway, his hand still suspended in midair where he had been pounding on the wood. The venue manager was breathing heavily, holding a tablet with the official cancellation record stamped across the screen in dark red ink. Cancel? Ethan's voice cracked, a high-pitched ring buzzing in his ears. He instinctively reached up to adjust his hearing aid, twisting the volume dial up, as if he simply hadn't heard the words correctly. That's impossible. We paid a 50% deposit. The flowers were delivered this morning. Miss Clark canceled it personally late yesterday afternoon, Mr. Sterling, the manager said, looking at him with a mixture of pity and annoyance.
She waved.
The refund. She told us to clear out all her personal belongings and cancel the catering. Didn't she tell you? Before Ethan could process the words, the heavy double doors at the end of the hall swung open. His mother, draped in a mink coat despite the summer heat, marched down the carpet flanked by family members and wealthy guests. Ethan, what is taking so long? Mrs. Sterling demanded, her voice cutting through the hall. The guests are sitting in the chapel. Where is that ungrateful girl? Don't tell me she's throwing another dramatic fit over hair and makeup. Chloe followed closely behind, clutching her delicate chiffon dress, her face still bearing a slight red mark where Emma had slapped her the day before. She rushed to Ethan's side, clutching his forearm. Ethan, don't be angry with Emma. Maybe she was just scared of marriage? I can go call her. She canceled the venue, Ethan blurted out. The corridor went dead silent. Mrs. Sterling's face twisted in disbelief, then flushed deep red with rage. She, what? She canceled the Sterling family's wedding? Who gave that pauper the right to humiliate us like this? Shut up. All of you. Just shut up. Ethan yelled, shoving his mother's bodyguards aside. His mind was spinning into a vortex of chaos. Emma was always quiet. She was always patient. For 7 years, no matter how harsh his mother's words were, no matter how many times he lost his temper, Emma would sit by his side, gently holding his hand, reminding him to take his medicine, making sure his hearing aids were cleaned and charged. She was like the air he breathed, invisible, constant, and utterly taken for granted. He pulled out his phone and dialed her number. The number you have dialed is currently unavailable. He called again, and again, 10 times, 20 times. She's just throwing a tantrum, Ethan, Chloe whispered softly, stepping closer and resting her head against his shoulder. She wants you to chase her. She wants you to bow down to her. If you give in now, she'll control you for the rest of your life. Ethan looked down at Chloe. For the first time in his life, looking into Chloe's wide, pitiful eyes didn't bring him the familiar urge to protect her. Instead, a cold knot tightened in his stomach. He pulled his arm away from Chloe's grip. Stay here, Ethan said coldly, turning on his heel and sprinting toward the parking lot. He drove like a madman back to the old apartment, the small, 2-bedroom place, where he and Emma had lived for 5 years before he bought the villa in North Hills. He slammed open the door, out of breath. Emma, stop playing games. Come out. Silence greeted him. The apartment didn't look like a crime scene or the site of a sudden flight. It was hauntingly tidy. Ethan rushed into the master bedroom. The closet doors were wide open. Half of the space was completely empty. All of Emma's clothes, her shoes, her sketchbooks, and even the small mug she used every morning were gone. On the nightstand sat a neat stack of items. Ethan walked over, his knees trembling. On top of the stack was the supplementary credit card he had given her 3 years ago, the one she had never spent a single penny of. Beneath, it was the ring box containing the pigeon egg diamond he had bought to please Chloe. Beside the ring lay a single piece of paper, a signed, notarized agreement renouncing any claims to their shared assets, including the North Hills house. And right in the center of the nightstand was a small, dusty leather box. Ethan opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were dozens of tiny, color-coded batteries for his hearing aid, neatly organized by date, alongside meticulous handwritten notes. July 12th. Left ear device needs recalibration at the clinic. August 4th. Rainy season starting. Remember to put his hearing aids in the dehumidifier box every night, or the moisture will cause static. Ethan hates the high frequency sounds of rain. Keep the window shut. Every single entry was written in Emma's neat, delicate handwriting. The last entry was dated 3 days ago. Ethan felt as if someone had plunged a blade into his chest and twisted it. He backed away, staggering against the desk, knocking over a trash bin. A crumpled sheet of tracing paper rolled out onto the floor. Ethan picked it up and unrolled it. It was Emma's original floor plan for the South Bay house. On the bottom corner, where the guest bedroom was supposed to be, she had drawn a room labeled Ethan's soundproof studio and rehabilitation room. Beside it, in small letters, she had written, a quiet space where his ears won't hurt when he works late. She hadn't designed a vanity room for herself. She hadn't designed a walk-in closet for her dresses. Every single inch of that house had been planned around his hearing impairment, his comfort, and his quiet. and he had thrown it all away to build a playground for Chloe in North Hills. A sharp, high-pitched screech suddenly burst through his hearing aid feedback. From his elevated blood pressure, Ethan clutched his head, dropping to his knees. On the cold floor, gasping for air in the terrifying, empty silence of the room. 2 weeks passed. Emma Clark did not exist in Ethan's world anymore. She had deleted her social media accounts, changed her phone number, and resigned from her architectural firm. It was as if she had dissolved into thin air. Meanwhile, the Sterling family was in turmoil. News of the cancelled wedding had leaked to the press, causing the Sterling Group stock to plunge. Mrs. Sterling was hospitalized due to high blood pressure, screaming daily that Emma had ruined their family reputation. To quell the scandal, Mrs. Sterling insisted that Ethan marry Chloe immediately. Chloe is from a respectable family, Ethan, Mrs. Sterling declared from her hospital bed. She's been by your side since you were children. Unlike that orphan who humiliated us. Ethan sat by the bed, his face pale and sunken. He hadn't shaved in days. He wore his hearing aid, but the world felt strangely muted, devoid of the gentle, warm voice that used to anchor him. Chloe stood beside him, carefully peeling an apple. Ethan, don't worry about the press. My family will invest in the new South Bay development project to cover the Sterling Group's losses. As long as we're together, everything will go back to normal. Ethan slowly turned his head to look at Chloe. How did you find Emma's stepfather? Chloe's hand paused for a fraction of a second. She quickly smoothed her expression, placing a slice of apple on a plate. What do you mean, Ethan? I told you I was trying to do something nice. I thought Emma would be happy to have her family at the wedding rehearsal. Emma's stepfather beat her mother to death in front of her eyes when she was 12 years old. Ethan said, his voice flat, dangerously cold. She spent 7 years in therapy trying to overcome that terror. I only told you about it once, late at night, when I was drunk. Ethan leaned forward, his eyes bloodshot. I told you that story in confidence. How did you track down a convicted abuser who was released from prison 6 months ago? How did you get him into the Sterling estate? Chloe's face drained of color. I just hired a private investigator. I thought they had reconciled. You did it on purpose, Ethan said softly. It wasn't a question, it was a realization that hit him like a physical blow. You brought that monster to terrify her. You wanted her to break down. You wanted her to hit you so I would defend you. Ethan, how can you say that to me? Chloe cried, tears welling up in her eyes. Instantly, she reached out to grab his hand. I love you. I've loved you since we were kids. She was just a charity case you picked up when you felt sorry for her. She never belonged in our circle. Get out, Ethan whispered. Ethan, get out. Ethan roared, slamming his fist against the hospital table. Chloe recoiled in terror, her fake tears freezing on her cheeks. She bit her lip hard, realization dawning on her that the weak, pliable Ethan she had manipulated for years was suddenly slipping out of her hands. She grabbed her designer bag and rushed out of the room in shame. Once she was gone, Ethan sat alone in the quiet hospital room. He pulled out his phone and opened a file that a detective agency had sent him an hour ago. The report detailed Chloe's recent banking activities. A week before the wedding, Chloe had transferred $50,000 to an anonymous account, registered under the name of Richard Miller, Emma's stepfather. Chloe hadn't just invited him. She had paid him to come and destroy Emma. And Ethan had stood there, holding Chloe in his arms, calling Emma an ungrateful woman. He had watched the woman he promised to protect drown in terror, and he had pushed her head deeper under the water. Ethan closed his eyes as a tear finally spilled over his lashes, burning a path down his cheek. He tapped his phone and dialed the detective's number. Find her. Ethan's voice trembled with desperation. I don't care how much it costs or which city she's in. Find Emma Clark. 300 miles away, in the coastal metropolis of North Harbor. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Vance Architectural Design Studio, casting warm golden light across heavy wooden drafting tables. Emma stood in front of a massive model, adjusting a miniature glass panel with precision tweezers. She wore a simple white linen shirt, her hair tied up in a losegun. Her cheeks had regained their color, and the dark circles under her eyes were completely gone. You're working late again. A deep, warm voice sounded behind her. Emma turned around and smiled. Julian Vance walked in, holding 2 cups of hot coffee. Julian was 32, tall, with sharp, intelligent eyes behind thin, silver-framed glasses. He was the senior partner at Vance Studio, an internationally acclaimed architect, and the person Emma had called on that stormy night. 7 years ago, before Ethan entered her life, Julian had been Emma's senior mentor at university. He was the one who recognized her extraordinary talent for spatial design. When Emma dropped out to care for Ethan and succumbed to her depression, Julian had promised her, "If you ever want to build your own dreams, instead of someone else's, my studio will always have a desk for you." It took 7 years, but she had finally claimed that desk. "I'm just finishing the final blueprints for the Coastal Art Center," Emma said, accepting the coffee. "Thank you, Julian, for everything." "You don't need to thank me, Emma. You earned this position with your talent," Julian said softly, looking at her with quiet admiration. "By the way, the police department in your hometown called this morning." Emma's hand tightened slightly around the coffee cup. "With the evidence you provided and the legal team I assigned to the case," Julian continued gently, "they have officially reopened the investigation into your mother's death. Richard Miller's parole has been revoked, and he's back in custody facing new charges of evidence tampering and homicide." Emma took a deep breath. A weight that had been pressing down on her chest for 15 years suddenly lifted. The monster that had haunted her dreams was finally behind iron bars, not because a man had promised to protect her, but because she had stood up, gathered the courage, and fought back herself. "Thank you, Julian," she whispered, a genuine, radiant smile blooming on her face. "There's one more thing," Julian added, pulling a sleek black invitation from his coat pocket. "The North Harbor Architecture Summit is tonight. Our studio is receiving the annual Landmark Award. I want you to step onto the podium with me as the lead designer." Emma looked at the golden lettering on the invitation. For 7 years she had hidden in Ethan's shadow, sketching designs secretly while he passed them off as his own or dismissed them as silly doodles. Now her name was going to be written in light. "I'd be honored," Emma said firmly. The North Harbor Grand Ballroom was packed with elite architects, investors, and media outlets. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and the melody of a live string quartet filled the air. Emma stood on the elevated stage in an elegant, emerald green silk gown. Her hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her posture was graceful and confident. When she stepped up to the microphone to present the design concept for the Coastal Art Center, the applause was deafening. In the back row of the audience, a man stood frozen, staring at the stage as if he were seeing a ghost. It was Ethan. He had spent 2 weeks tracing every lead until he finally found her name listed on the summit's presenter roster. He had driven 300 miles through the night just to see her. In his mind, he had imagined this reunion 1,000 times. He thought he would see a pale, heartbroken Emma hiding in a cheap rental apartment, weeping over their lost 7 years. He thought he would drop to his knees, present the South Bay House deed, apologize, and she would tearfully run into his arms. But the woman standing on that stage did not look like she needed saving. She was radiant, powerful, and surrounded by people who looked at her with pure respect. Beside her stood Julian Vance, who adjusted her microphone with practiced care, whispering something in her ear that made Emma laugh effortlessly. The sight choked Ethan with a wave of jealousy, so intense it felt like poison in his veins. When the presentation ended and the guests moved to the cocktail lounge, Ethan pushed past the security guards and strode toward Emma. "Emma," he called out. His voice cut through the soft chatter of the hall. Several guests turned to look. Emma froze for a split second, her back turning stiff. But when she slowly turned around, the emotion in her eyes wasn't shock, fear, or anger. It was absolute, chilling indifference. "Emma, I finally found you," Ethan said, his voice trembling as he stepped closer. He looked haggard, his designer suit unkempt, his eyes bloodshot. "Please hear me out. I was wrong. I was blind." Julian stepped forward instinctively, placing a protective hand on Emma's shoulder. "Sir, this is a private event. Get your hands off her," Ethan snapped, glaring at Julian. He turned back to Emma, pulling a thick envelope from his coat pocket. "Emma, look at this. I sold the North Hills house. I canceled everything with Chloe. I bought the land in South Bay, exactly where you wanted it. I signed the deed over to your name." He held out the papers with hands that shook violently. "We can start over. The wedding, we can have the wedding next week in Hawaii, just like we planned. I bought the plane tickets for just the two of us." Emma looked at the paper in his hand, then lifted her eyes to look into Ethan's face. For 7 years, she would have given anything to hear those words. She had begged him to listen to her dreams, to respect her boundaries, to choose her over Chloe. But now, seeing his pathetic, desperate state, she felt nothing, no satisfaction, no heartbreak, only a mild sense of weariness. Ethan. Emma spoke, her voice calm and measured, like a quiet stream. You still don't get it, do you? Get what? Ethan pleaded, taking another step closer. I broke off all contact with Chloe. I found out what she did to your stepfather. I sent the evidence to the police myself. I'm punishing her. I swear, she will never appear near us again. You didn't break up with Chloe because you realized you loved me, Emma said softly. You broke up with her because her presence finally ruined your reputation and your ego. That's not true. I love you, Emma. Ethan cried, tears streaming down his face. If you loved me, you would have heard me when I said I didn't want a flashy ring, Emma said, her voice piercingly clear. If you loved me, you wouldn't have given my safety charm to another woman. You wouldn't have mocked my childhood trauma to make her laugh. Ethan swallowed hard, his breath catching in his throat. I misheard you. My hearing aid. Stop blaming your hearing aid, Ethan, Emma interrupted, stepping closer to him, looking directly into his eyes. Your ears were impaired, but your heart was deaf. You heard every single thing Chloe wanted, even when she whispered. But when I screamed in pain right in front of you, you turned off your hearing aid because you found my pain annoying. Ethan felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He staggered back, his face turning paper white. I didn't leave because of the house or the ring or the honeymoon, Emma continued, her voice unwavering. I left because I finally realized that loving you required me to destroy myself. And I don't hate myself anymore. Emma, please. Ethan sank to his knees right there on the marble floor of the ballroom, surrounded by society elites and flashing cameras. The proud heir of the Sterling family was sobbing like a child, clutching the hem of her green silk dress. Give me one more chance, just one more chance. I can't live without you. Emma gently pulled her dress from his grasp. She didn't kick him, nor did she raise her voice. She turned to Julian and said quietly, let's go. The air in here is stale. Emma, Ethan screamed, trying to get up to follow her, but Julian's bodyguard stepped in, forming an impenetrable wall between them. Outside the hall, a sudden summer rainstorm broke over the city. Thunder roared across the night sky, rattling the glass facade of the building. Ethan broke free from the guards and ran out into the pouring rain. He saw Emma walking toward a black sedan, Julian holding a large black umbrella over her head, shielding her completely from the storm. Emma, it's thundering. Ethan screamed at the top of his lungs, running into the downpour. You're afraid of thunder. Come here. I's here to hold you. He waited for her to panic. He waited for her to freeze, to scream, to run back into his arms as she had done 100 times before during stormy nights. But Emma stopped at the door of the car. She turned around under the umbrella. She looked at the flashing lightning, listened to the deafening crack of thunder echoing off the skyscrapers, and took a deep, clear breath of the rain-washed air. She didn't flinch. She didn't tremble. She looked across the rain at Ethan, gave him a small, final nod of farewell, and stepped smoothly into the car. The door closed with a quiet thud, cutting off his sight of her forever. The car pulled away into the night, its taillights fading into the misty rain. Ethan stood alone in the freezing downpour. The rain soaked his suit, pouring over his head, seeping into the delicate electronic ports of his high-end hearing aids. Bzzzzzt. A harsh, painful squeal of static erupted in both of his ears, followed by a sharp pop. The circuits fried. The world instantly collapsed into total, unbroken, absolute silence. He clawed at his ears, ripping the ruined devices out and throwing them onto the wet asphalt. He dropped to his knees in the puddles, screaming her name into the thunder, but he couldn't even hear the sound of his own voice anymore. All he had left was the silence he had built for himself. 6 months later, the Sterling Group's bankruptcy restructuring made headlines across the financial news. Stripped of key investments and crippled by legal battles, Mrs. Sterling was forced to liquidate the family estates to pay off debts. She suffered a severe stroke and was moved to a public nursing home. Chloe's family cut ties with her entirely after her involvement in the Richard Miller bribery scandal was made public. Unable to find work in high society, she was reduced to working as a low-level sales associate, hounded daily by creditors. As for Ethan, he retreated entirely from public life. He moved into the partially completed house in South Bay, the one Emma had originally designed. He refused to hire contractors to fix the mistakes. He tore down the polished tiles Chloe had picked out with his own hands, leaving raw, concrete walls exposed. He sat alone in the large, empty room that Emma had designated as a soundproof studio. He refused to wear new hearing aids. He lived in a world of absolute, ringing silence. One afternoon, a package arrived at his door. It was a thick, glossy magazine dedicated to international architecture. On the cover was a breathtaking image of the newly opened North Harbor Coastal Art Center. Inside was a full-page interview with the lead architect, Emma Clark. Ethan sat by the window, his trembling fingers tracing her image on the glossy paper. In the photograph, Emma stood under a canopy of light, holding a golden trophy, surrounded by her design team. Standing beside her, holding her hand with quiet, proud affection, was Julian Vance. Beside the photo was a highlighted quote from Emma's speech. For a long time, I believed that love meant enduring silence, making myself smaller, and waiting for someone to listen. But I learned that true strength is not waiting to be heard. It is finding your own voice and building a home where you can breathe. Ethan stared at those words for hours until the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, dark shadows across the cold floor. He held the magazine against his chest, clutching it as tightly as he could, and closed his eyes. In the absolute darkness and silence of the empty house, he tried with all his heart to recall the sound of her voice, the soft, warm, patient voice that had called his name for 7 years. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't hear it anymore.